Welcome to the Robert Musil Literature Museum. Today we meet the photographer Kate Joyce, who lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Over 30 years pursuing the visual image, Kate Joyce is a photographer working in typologies, the relationship between pictures and literature. In 2020, Joyce published her project Qualities of Sight, a Musil Kaleidoscope. It's an experimental interpretive project, and above all, she made us curious. Kate studied photojournalism and sociology at San Francisco State University, Spanish in Guatemala and Chile, and documentary photography at the Center for Documentary Studies at Duke University. She received a Louis Hine Documentary Initiative Fellowship in 2003-04, during which she worked in Bloemfontein, South Africa. In 2010, she founded Kate Joyce Studios to manage her freelance commercial architectural photography commissions. May 2018, Kate opened We Are Time Is, an exhibition of color photographs on the subject of embodiment and time passing at Santa Fe Institute. Her book, Big Ears Knoxville, which was published by Hat and Beard Press, was released in spring 2019. It's a 5-year collection of photographs about a music festival and the town where the festival takes place, with essays by musicians Rachel Grimes and Joe Henry in collaboration with Rockfish Stew Institute of Literature and Materials. Dear Kate, on your website kate-joyce.com, you describe your project Qualities of Sight, a Musil Kaleidoscope, just like this: that you tried to read your photographs through the lens of Musil and to read Musil through the lens of photography. How would you describe the process of the work, and when did you start it? The first of the photographs which you posted on Instagram was posted on August 14th in 2020, but I think you started it earlier, isn't it?
Hello, yes. So, first, thanks for having this conversation with me, and it's nice to be here. I'm in my studio in Santa Fe, and I share a floor with other people, so if you hear anything, those are the neighbors. But no, it's true that I started the project last summer, so August 2020, and it's sort of an arbitrary date, and yet I was reading back in preparing and realized that, The Man Without Qualities actually starts August 1913. And so I kind of like that, a little over 100 years into the future, I sort of, to the month, started messing with Musil's writing and my photography. But there are other issues around that date that have some bearing to a question that comes later. As far as process, it's all pretty straightforward, actually. It's a very intuitive kind of, it's just an intuitive process that I'll describe sort of step by step how I do it, but I also wanted to introduce you to another project that I was working on that was very much a part of what prompted me to do this investigation with The Man Without Qualities. So 2 years ago, I started working with literature and photography, and this is a very new method and way of exploring the visual image. And for me, I hadn't done this prior. But so the project, I actually have a proof of it here. So this is it. It's called Metamorphosis. It's photographs that I made 20 years ago when I was a teenager and traveling alone in Chile. And I came back to the United States and kind of didn't know what to do with my photographs, what they were. So they've been sitting for 20 years. My partner, he mentioned, knowing that I had this interest in processes of metamorphosis, but also Ovid, kind of mused about whether it would be possible to combine the two. And so I tried it, and indeed it's made something very, very interesting. And so last summer that I was deep in metamorphosis, and had just finished reading The Man Without Qualities, and I'd spent about a year reading it, and I was upset that I didn't remember more, and knew that I had been in a very special realm. And so I've just thought perhaps I can apply this same method to The Man Without Qualities, and in that way re-engage in sort of a different, in a different rhythm with the novel. So I've been thinking about how the metamorphosis and The Man Without Qualities, why is it that these bodies of literature, why is it that they work in this way? I think it's working to make these kind of pairings and relationships between image and text. So the Ovid, it's so back up. Comparing the two works is kind of interesting. So you have the Metamorphosis and Ovid, and The Man Without Qualities and Robert Musil. One is writing about the classical world, the other is writing about the modern world. They're both writing about times of transition. Ovid and the myths, the Greek myths and Roman myths, though there's much change taking place, it's also in a stabilizing way. For Musil, the transitions that are taking place and that he's writing about at the turn of the century are totally destabilized. Everything's just on the brink of coming apart, and the ideas he's thinking about have to do with that instability. For me personally, using these bodies of work, it allows for a creative freedom for me, and in how I find the photographs. So Metamorphosis, there's a universality there. The stories are universal in their themes. Over millennia, Narcissus has, stayed with us. They're as true then as they are now, and they are malleable. The creative freedom with The Man Without Qualities comes from a multiplicity. So the metaphors and analogies and ideas that he's bringing up in the book are just very flexible. They can be applied in multiple different contexts. And so that allows me a kind of a world to work with, and why it becomes very interesting that The Man Without Qualities, his world, Musil's world, can blend with my contemporary world in a very different context, but still have this core. Another difference between the two, for Metamorphosis, the narrative is actually preserved. I've stripped the poem down very, very spare, similarly finding lines that resonate with the photographs, but there still is a narrative. The story is maintained. Whereas with this project, it's completely lost, and the pairings are complete on their own. They are they belong to their own relationship at that point. And often I forget even what the context is that a quote comes from, or what it was actually talking about once I've put it together with another photograph. So the narrative is lost, which I don't think Musil would completely mind. He had an interesting sense of time, both in how long he took to write the book, and then also chronology wasn't that important to him. So one last bit about this, though, is that for both, I use the same process. So I discover photographs and I discover lines or quotes, parts of the story that resonate. And that's the really enjoyable part. And I hope it's enjoyable to also look at it. But certainly in the making of it, that's the puzzle solver in me really enjoys that process. So, I think I mentioned this earlier, but read the book, made lots of notes, go back to my notes now, and I just then sift through my archive, which, after years of making images, is tens of thousands of images deep, and most of them will never see the light of day. And I've pretty much said for this project that everything is fair game. So if something matches with Musil's words, it matches, and I'm pleased. And so I'm about halfway through the book. I don't know how long it's going to take to complete it. I work on it fairly regularly, but I just passed 100 pairings. So some of them are really good, and some of them, you could do over 1 million times.
American photographer Terry Evans posted a comment on Instagram and said, "Fascinating pairings between photographs and text." That's what I also think about your project, as I've already told you. And Instagram user electra.irony says, "Musil's novel The Man Without Qualities, it's one of those books you get involved with like a love affair, difficult but thrilling." Is this an impression which you share? How would you describe your relationship with Musil's writing?
Right. So Terry, actually, she's an old friend of mine from Chicago, a great photographer. And it's true. I'm glad that there's, that they've, created some sense of fascination. That's sort of that's the fun of it, and that's the complexity of it. Those pairings, as I look back on them, I thought maybe it would be interesting to talk about some of the qualities that I see come up, because, when I'm making them, I'm not necessarily looking for this, but now that I look at them, there are at least 4 qualities that sort of the pairs contain. There's an enigmatic quality. There's a direct quality where I'm responding very sort of literally to the quote. The poetic, and then what I'm calling playful, but where I'm playing with the metaphors or ideas that Musil is presenting. It's another way to think of it would be like amplification. So I'm going to walk through just 4 examples and read the quote, and then hopefully we can just put on the screen the photograph that goes with it. So an example of the enigmatic is, here's the quote: "The rising and setting of the sun, the moon, the phases of the moon, of Venus, of the rings of Saturn, and many other significant phenomena were all in accordance with the forecasts in the astronomical yearbooks. The water vapor in the air was at its maximal state of tension, while the humidity was minimal. In a word that characterizes the facts fairly accurately, even if it is a bit old-fashioned, it was a fine day in August 1913. So the photograph, we see a woman, it's actually a dear friend of mine, Mara Zepeda, and she's looking out into the distance. And for me, the enigmatic, this one just, it's an atmosphere that feels correct. It feels like the sun, it feels like the moon, it feels like Venus, it feels like Saturn, this cosmic beyond. And also there's a bit of foreboding, only because we know how history plays out. But the August 1913, as Mara looks off into the distance and there's some clouds and whatnot, August 1913, less than a year later, would be the beginning of World War I. So the example of a poetic quality, her beauty could be gently lifted off her. This one is so short, but it's so nice. Yeah, I think it says everything it needs to. Her beauty is her hair in this photograph, and the wind is gently lifting it up off her back. And then humor, an example of humor as a quality in these pairings. Here's the quote. Unfortunately, stupidity has something uncommonly endearing and natural about it. This was a trash can I came across walking home one afternoon in Chicago. So the last one, which is playing with metaphor or amplifying a metaphor. Here's the quote. They were strong feminine lips that ate as if they were getting the housework done. And here, I think what I enjoy the most about it and why it feels like it's playful and sort of amplifying is that I don't imagine that Robert Musil had in mind a hospitality cleaning cart when he talked about getting the housework done. But, you know, something much more domestic. And so that's the twisting that is fun to try to get around and away with.
Thanks very much, Kate Joyce, for this conversation. You've traveled to Europe several times, to Austria, and we hope to meet you again in Austria soon, and maybe one day you come to Klagenfurt as well. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.